Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan O'Connell and I'll be your instructor in this lab. Create a Windows virtual machine in Azure. We're going to talk about what is an Azure virtual machine. We're going to create a Windows VM using the CLI. We're going to test that connection and then we're going to clean up our resources. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch the video, and I'd like to thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. So what is an Azure Windows VM? A Windows virtual machine is a virtual machine that is running a distribution of Windows as the guest operating system. And the Windows operating system can range anywhere from Windows 7 to Windows 10, Server 2012, 2016, 2019, Exchange Server, Windows SQL, and more, as long as it's a Microsoft product. Again, it's a computer or file that is typically called an image, which behaves like an actual machine. It's one of the files that contains everything. It runs in Windows or Linux, and this gives you the flexibility to run multiple machines on a physical computer, and each system has a different operating system. So we can run Windows and Linux side by side. Each of these virtual machines provides its own virtual hardware, which includes CPU, memory, hard drives, network resources, interfaces, and other such devices. Again, when you create a Windows VM, there are a few methods to do this. Obviously, you can create it through the portal. You can use Cloud Shell or the CLI. You can use PowerShell or an ARM template or a Resource Manager template. Resource Manager template and ARM template are the same things. Selecting an image is one of the most important decisions you'll make when creating a VM. An image is a template that is used to create the VM. These templates include the OS and often other software such as development tools or web hosting environments. The Azure Virtual Disks are measured in gigabits, which is not the same as gigabytes. And a size of a gigabit is relatively close. For example, as you can see in this PowerPoint slide, you can just multiply your 1074 by whatever size you want it to have your hard drive, and then you will get roughly close to the size you're looking for. Again, what are command shells? Command shells are environments on an operating system such as Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, where we execute command using text. From the Azure CLI perspective, there are two primary shells, Bash and PowerShell. Bash was originally designed for Unix and treats the output as text, and PowerShell is originally designed for Windows and treats the output as a command or as objects. And these objects will allow you to do scripting, support functions, iOS, and a whole lot more, and the same with Bash as well. Cloud Shell CLI. The Azure Command Line interface is Microsoft's cross-platform command line experience for managing Azure resources. It's built specifically for managing Azure via the command line. Some of the key features of the CLI are interactive mode, multiple outputs. You can combine multiple commands into a single command. It's flexible with extensions. It's cross-platform, which means it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and it works all in the Cloud Shell. So it's one place to do everything. It's a really cool tool, and I would encourage you guys to learn more about it because it'll help you in your day-to-day managing of your Azure environment. Cloud Shell versus PowerShell versus the portal. What's the difference between all of these? Well, the Azure CLI is designed to be cross-platform, to work with Linux, Windows, Mac OS. It's easy to use, and it was built specifically for managing Azure via the command line. PowerShell is designed as a scripting and configuration management environment for various Microsoft systems and relies on modules in order to support Azure. The portal provides a graphical user interface for managing Azure via a web browser. And then we have software development kits. The Azure SDKs are a collection of libraries built to make it easier to use Azure services from your language of choice. These libraries are designed to be constant, approachable, diagnosable, and dependable, and much more as well. Again, if you're a developer, you'll know more about SDKs, but we're not going in depth to explain about SDKs because this is beyond the scope of this training session. Again, the supporting resources created automatically when you create a VM. A virtual disk is created. A virtual disk is a software component that emulates the actual disk drive, such as an optical drive, a floppy disk, a hard drive, so that you get an idea of what a virtual disk is. A VNet or virtual network can be connected to an on-prem network, enabling resources to communicate between each other and provide isolation. A public and private IPs are created. The public IP is used to communicate with the outside world or the outside network, where a private IP address is used to communicate within your own network on your own LAN. On the security groups, it's nothing but a firewall which limits the network traffic at a virtual machine level. It consists of security rules that allow or deny inbound or outbound traffic based on the source destination IP addresses, port, and protocols. It's there to keep you safe and help protect you. Again, when you create an Azure VM through the CLI, as you can see here is the command. You would say azvm create, and then as you can see from this command, we're telling it to create the virtual machine, put it into a Windows VM resource group, name that WinFS01, use a 2016 data center image, use the admin username as azuser, and then of course the admin password. It normally takes a few minutes to create, because not only is it building your virtual machine, but it's creating those network virtual disks, public IPs, private IP addresses, and security groups as well at the same time. So it does take a couple of minutes to create, but then it'll tell you in the Azure portal it's been created. Again, this is the syntax command to delete the resource group. So you would go in and delete that resource group, and that would delete your virtual machine, and it would delete any other resources created by your VM if your VM was placed in that group, such as your network components, your virtual disk, your security groups, and of course your public and private IPs. Remember, when you're running an Azure VM, you must pay for the compute time on a permanent basis. So while it's running, you're paying for it. If you're not running that virtual machine, stop it and put it in a deallocated mode or delete it. If it's in a deallocated mode and it's stopped completely, you won't be paying for it. You only pay for stuff the moment you fire stuff up again. So that's just something to keep in mind. So let's move over into the Azure portal and let's go and create a VM via the CLI. As you can see, I've gone ahead and logged into the Azure Windows portal. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create our very first Windows server using Cloud Shell or Bash. So what we want to do is move over and click Cloud Shell, and this will open up Cloud Shell. And by default, it's gone to PowerShell because that was the last interface I was working in. So we want to switch to Bash. So from the drop-down menu, select Bash and click Confirm to switch over. And this is going to switch us over to Bash. Once we've switched over to Bash, we're going to go ahead and create a resource group to put our Windows server in that. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these commands in. This is az group create. It's going to create the group Windows VM, and it's going to put it in the East US location. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. This is going to go away and create that resource group for us. And as you can see, it was really quick. It didn't take too long to create. I can switch over to resource groups and I can do a refresh. Just drag this down and you will see very shortly my Windows resource group will appear. And as you can see, there's my Windows resource group over here. I had to click refresh a couple of times for that to happen, but that's now showing. So what we want to do now is we want to create a Windows VM using Bash. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these commands in that I have, and I'll read them to you before we get them sorted out. So I've said create a virtual machine by using the azvm create. I've said put that into the Windows VM resource group. I've said let's name that WinFS01. It's a 2016 data center server. The username is azuser, and that's the password. And I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And this could take anywhere from about a minute, maybe to 2 or 3 minutes to create. And then once this is created, you will see a message here saying that it was created, and then we would actually go to the VM and remote in and test that VM. So we'll just wait a few seconds while this runs, and then we will fire up that VM. And as you can see, that Windows virtual machine has been created. It put it in the East US location, assigned it a MAC address. The power state is that VM has been powered on, it's running. It's got its private IP address, its public IP address, which is what we use to connect with via remote desktop, and of course the VM name. So I'll just minimize this for now and then switch over to virtual machines. And then as you can see, there's our virtual machine. If you don't see your virtual machine there, just click the refresh button and it will fire up. And as you can see, I'm remoting into my virtual machine, and you will notice now all of my virtual machine settings are here. I can click this drop down button here and download RDP. This will download RDP for me, and we can actually connect to that server. So we'll download RDP, and the RDP client has opened up on my desktop. I'm just going to drag this over, and I'm going to click connect. I'm going to confirm I want to connect, and this is going to ask me for my password. I'm going to go ahead and type in my password that I had on my little bash script. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I want to connect. And now we are connecting to our Windows desktop, and this will just take a second. It's just opened up on another window, so I'll just drag this over here. I'll just drag this out so that we can see, and I'll go ahead and close that. And there we go, we've connected successfully to our Windows server, and we've created a Windows server using Cloud Shell, and then we've gone into Cloud Shell and we've created our server using Bash. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down and close this down and say okay. So the thing that we want to do once we've created our resources, it's always good practice to go back and clean up. So I'm going to click on virtual machines. I'm going to go to my virtual machine again, and I'm going to stop this virtual machine. I'm going to click OK to stop this server, and we'll get a notification here saying that it's stopping that virtual machine. Once that virtual machine has come to a stop, it'll be in a deallocated mode, and therefore we're not paying for it. We can delete that virtual machine if we no longer need it, or if we do want to use it, we can fire it up. So bear in mind, if you're not using your virtual machine or not using your virtual machines, then make sure you stop them and put them in a deallocated mode, because Azure again is a pay-as-you-go for platform, so you will pay for the resources as long as they are running. So we'll just wait a few seconds for this virtual machine to stop. We will then go ahead and delete that, and then we'll go ahead and delete the resource group. So as you can see, it didn't take too long. The virtual machine has successfully stopped. We can dismiss this notification, and we can go ahead and say delete and say yes, we want to delete that virtual machine. But if you notice, because it stopped and it's in a deallocated state, so that's what you want to see on your virtual machines if you no longer want to use them and you want to stop them. You want to make sure they're in that deallocated mode. Again, if we come up to notifications, we can see that our virtual machine has been deleted, which is good. So we can dismiss this notification, and we can move over to resource groups. We can move over to our resource group here, Windows VM, and we can go ahead and delete this resource group and delete all of these other services that were created. So an easy way to do this is to highlight the Windows VM name and say copy, move over to delete, paste it into the resource group name, and then the delete button will highlight, then press delete, and this will start deleting those resources. So in a sense, we're cleaning up after ourselves so that we have a nice clean platform to work with again as you're working through your different labs or as you're training within the Azure portal. So we'll just wait a few seconds for this resource to delete as well. And as you can see, that resource has successfully deleted everything. We will close this down, and we'll just hit a refresh a couple of times, and you will notice our Windows VM resource group has been deleted, and our system is now nice and clean again. So I'd like to thank you for viewing. Again, I'd like to thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. I would like to thank you for supporting me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.